The sun had just started to rise over the airport, casting a pale golden light across the frost-covered tarmac. Inside Terminal 2, the air was quiet, peaceful, and cold. Travelers shuffled sleepily toward their gates, clutching coffees and rolling carry-ons, unaware that history was about to unfold in the most ordinary of settings. Near Gate 37, a man stood calmly, his hands tucked into the pockets of a plain hoodie. He wore no suit, no Rolex, no entourage of bodyguards. To the casual observer, he was just another African traveler, unremarkable, anonymous, blending into the crowd. But this man was Ibrahim Traoré, the 35-year-old president of Burkina Faso, a former military captain turned revolutionary leader who had risen to power in 2022 on a wave of anti-colonial sentiment and a promise to reclaim his nation's sovereignty. He preferred to travel like this, humble, private, and quiet. No cameras, no loud announcements, no red carpets. For him, leadership meant staying grounded, moving among his people, not above them. He had just returned from a diplomatic meeting in Europe, where he discussed matters of gold exploitation, foreign interference, and Africa's future. Now, all he wanted was to get home. As he walked toward the Air France flight bound for Ouagadougou, he greeted an airport worker in French with a warm smile. "Bonjour, ça va?" The worker smiled back, oblivious to the fact that he had just exchanged pleasantries with a head of state. That's how Traoré liked it. He boarded the plane quietly, nodded politely at the flight crew, and took his seat in business class, row 2A, near the window. No one noticed, no one cared, or so he thought. A few rows behind him, whispers had already begun. A senior French businessman, Edouard Renard, CEO of Voltalia Energy, a major player in Africa's energy sector, had arrived late to the gate. He was accustomed to VIP treatment, first-class upgrades, champagne upon boarding, obsequious staff tripping over themselves to accommodate him. But when he demanded a seat in business class, the gate agents hesitated. The cabin was full. Renard's face tightened. "This is unacceptable," he snapped, his voice dripping with the unspoken entitlement of a man who viewed Africa as his company's playground. "Do you know who I am? I'm restructuring half your continent." The gate agents scrambled, whispering into headsets, until a senior flight attendant named Claire Dubois was summoned to resolve the situation. Claire, a 20-year Air France veteran, strode onto the plane with a clipboard and a cold, practiced smile. Her eyes scanned the cabin, lingering momentarily on Traoré. He sat quietly, scrolling through his phone, his hoodie and lack of visible status symbols marking him, in her mind, as an anomaly in business class. She leaned toward a junior attendant and muttered in French, "Probably a mistake." Without a word to Traoré, she approached another black passenger, a young Burkinabe man in his 20s, and demanded his seat. "We need to accommodate another guest," she said, her tone leaving no room for protest. The man blinked, confused. "Why me?" Claire's smile didn't reach her eyes. "Operational reasons." It was then that Traoré stood, his voice, calm but firm, cut through the cabin. "Enough," he said. "You are making decisions based on skin, not tickets. That's called discrimination." Claire froze. For a moment, the cabin held its breath. Passengers glanced up from their newspapers and laptops, sensing the shift in the air. Claire recovered quickly, her professionalism masking her irritation. "Sir, I'll have to ask you to sit down. Don't cause a scene." Traoré didn't flinch. He locked eyes with her, his gaze steady, fearless. "If it's operational, explain why I'm being asked and not anyone else." Claire hesitated, her cheeks flushing. She turned on her heel and retreated to the galley, where she radioed the cockpit. Moments later, Renard was ushered into business class, his smug satisfaction palpable. Claire fawned over him, offering champagne and warm towels, while pointedly ignoring Traoré. The flight passed in uneasy silence. Traoré sat motionless, his gaze fixed on the clouds outside the window. He wasn't angry, he was calculating. Years of navigating coups, foreign exploitation, and the weight of leading a nation under siege had taught him patience. He knew the storm was coming. As the plane began its descent into Ouagadougou, the cabin lights flickered on. Passengers stirred, fastening seatbelts and gathering belongings. Outside, the sun blazed over the red soil of Burkina Faso, the landlocked nation Traoré had sworn to defend from foreign predators. But what no one on the plane could see yet was the convoy waiting on the tarmac. Rows of black SUVs, military vehicles, and a phalanx of presidential guards standing at rigid attention. Ministers of defense, foreign affairs, and security waited in the heat, their faces unreadable. Claire, peering out the window, gasped. "What is this?" she whispered. Renard smirked, adjusting his tie. "Clearly this is for me. I told you I'm involved in big projects here." But as the plane rolled to a stop, a tall officer in a black beret boarded, his boots echoing ominously. He walked straight to row 2A, saluted sharply, and barked, "Monsieur le Président, bienvenue au pays." The cabin erupted in murmurs. Claire's face drained of color. Renard's mouth hung open. Traoré rose slowly, his hoodie suddenly a symbol not of anonymity, but of defiance. On the tarmac, the crowd erupted in cheers. Cameras flashed as Traoré descended the stairs, shaking hands with his ministers. Behind him, Claire and Renard were escorted off the plane in handcuffs, their arrogance replaced by trembling disbelief. The officer's voice was icy. "You have publicly disrespected the head of state on national soil. That is a serious offense." The fallout was swift and seismic. Within hours, videos of the arrest went viral. Hashtags like Respect Africa and I Stand with Burkina trended globally. Air France issued a tepid apology. Regrettable procedural missteps. But it was too late. Calls for a boycott spread like wildfire, not just in Burkina Faso, but across the continent. In France, politicians scrambled to contain the diplomatic crisis, while African youth celebrated Traoré as a hero. At the Ministry of Justice, Claire and Renard faced formal charges, public insult, discrimination, and abuse of power. During questioning, Claire sobbed. "I didn't know who he was." The investigator retorted, "You didn't need to know. You needed to treat him like a human being." Renard, stripped of his veneer of invincibility, faced legal battles in both Burkina Faso and France. The court's ruling was unambiguous. No immunity, no special treatment. Let justice be equal. Traoré, meanwhile, returned to work. No press conferences, no grandstanding. He visited a new school in a rural village, shook hands with farmers, and reviewed plans for a gold refinery that would keep Burkina Faso's resources in Burkinabe hands. His silence spoke louder than any speech. The message was clear: dignity is not granted, it is claimed. The incident on Flight 678 became more than a viral moment. It became a parable for a continent in flux. For decades, Africa had been treated as a footnote in global affairs, its leaders caricatured as corrupt dictators or passive recipients of Western aid. Traoré shattered that narrative. Here was a president who flew commercial, who refused to be stripped of his humanity, who turned a routine flight into a courtroom where colonial arrogance was put on trial. In the weeks that followed, the symbolism resonated far beyond Burkina Faso. From Lagos to Nairobi, young Africans dissected the story on social media, celebrating Traoré's quiet defiance as a blueprint for a new kind of leadership. Memes contrasted his hoodie with the tailored suits of aging autocrats. Scholars debated the incident as a turning point in post-colonial relations. And in European boardrooms, executives squirmed, realizing that the era of unchallenged exploitation was over. For Traoré, the journey was never about revenge. It was about redefining power. The French CEO saw Africa as a chessboard. Traoré saw it as a home. The flight attendant reduced passengers to their appearance. Traoré demanded to be seen as a man. In a world obsessed with symbols, suits, titles, skin color, he wielded humility as a weapon. As the sun set over Ouagadougou, casting long shadows over the presidential palace, Traoré sat at his desk, drafting a speech for the nation. Outside, the streets buzzed with energy. Vendors sold T-shirts with his face and the word humility printed in bold. Students debated his policies in cafes. For the first time in generations, hope felt tangible, earned, unborrowed. The story of Flight 678 would fade from headlines, but its lesson lingered. True power isn't loud. It doesn't demand recognition or grovel for validation. It sits quietly in seat 2A, reading a phone, waiting for the world to catch up. And when the wheels touch down on home soil, it stands, not as a conqueror, but as a witness to the moment a nation and a continent remembered its worth. In the end, the quiet man in the hoodie didn't just reclaim his seat, he reclaimed a legacy.